Well, hey there, Internet people, and welcome back to Green Wing Gaming, or welcome if you're new. If you are new to the channel, this is a Monday upload, and on Mondays, we like to talk about hobby stuff. So today, our topic of conversation is going to be that I finally got my hands on 10th edition. I know I'm a little late to the party, so I do apologize for that. And before I forget, I actually do owe you guys another little bit of an apology, because I haven't been uploading for the last couple of weeks. I had a couple of back-to-back catastrophes hit me that kind of stopped me from uploading, because I had one of my wisdom teeth come in, like, very suddenly. Like, one day it was fine, the next day I was in excruciating pain. So I had to get two of my wisdom teeth out, and I was out of commission for about a week. And then, right around the time I was getting ready to come back, all of a sudden, my computer started acting up, and I ended up basically completely replacing all of the hardware in my PC. So that was kind of an act of God. But we should be getting back to uploads fairly regularly pretty soon. Mondays are going to be back to normal almost immediately. Fridays might take a little bit longer. But anyways, as I said, we're talking about my first game of 10th, because that happened about like the week before I stopped uploading, and it took me a while to get that first game in, because my typical friend group of guys that I play Warhammer with, they have been desperately clinging to 10th. They're kind of traditionalists, and they are resistant to change. And YouTube channel or no, they just wanted nothing to do with 10th for a little while. And I'm hopefully gonna wean them into the new edition pretty soon, considering, like, things are going to be advancing to the point where there's just not going to be any rules for them to play the old edition, but whatever. That's a whole other topic of conversation, but we're going to be talking about my first impressions of the edition now that I've actually gotten to play, because we've talked a little bit about what my thoughts were, but none of that had any like actual experience behind it. So, but before we get too deep into talking about my first game, I would just like to remind you guys that this channel is still pretty young. I'm about 3 months in at this point, so anything you guys could do to help the channel grow, I would really, really appreciate it. You know, the usual liking, subscribing, even just watching all the way to the end of the video really does help. The more viewed hours I get on YouTube, the more the algorithm seems to like me. So, if you guys could do one, some, or all of these things, it would really help the channel out, and I personally would really appreciate it. It costs nothing to be kind, after all, am I right? Which is, like, the least embraced idea on the internet, but whatever. So, with all of that self-promo stuff out of the way, we're talking about my first game of 10th edition, so let's just get into it. Okay, so we're talking about my first game of 10th edition. We're going to start off by talking about the lists that were taken. We're going to talk a little bit about my expectations. I'm not going to give you guys the blow-by-blow description of how the game went, because we would be here for an hour. But we're going to talk a little bit about about the specifics of the game and why that is informing my opinion of the edition. So, to start off with the lists, I was running my Dark Angels. My opponent was running Chaos Demons. Specifically, he was running Demons of Khorne exclusively, and brought 0 Bloodletters. So this was a very specific list he was bringing. For me, I was running a kind of my usual standby of when I don't know what to bring, I bring a Battle Company. That's probably a kind of a dumb way to run it, but I don't care. It's my fallback when I'm new to an edition. I was just running a 7th edition Battle Company. So with the one little caveat that I brought a Firstborn Lieutenant, which didn't exist in 7th edition, but other than that, it was a 7th edition Battle Company. So I was running a Terminator Captain embedded in a squad of Deathwing Knights, had my Firstborn Lieutenant embedded in one of my squads of Tacticals. I had 3 squads of Tacticals, each with a plasma gun and Stormbolter on the Sergeant. So I was running them very bare bones, no heavy weapons in them, just because I didn't think it was going to be that necessary. Running like an extra heavy bolter or 2 wasn't really going to be helpful. Plus, this actually informs one of my reactions to the edition. I really don't like how they've handled the heavy rule. Because their whole thing is, we're trying to make the game simplified. Except now my heavy weapons all have a completely different ballistic skill from the rest of my guns, which I don't particularly feel like remembering. I don't know about you guys. So I found that really tedious. I found that really annoying to deal with, but there are worse things in life. So I didn't run any heavy weapons in my tactical squad specifically to avoid dealing with the heavy weapons and all their stuff. I ran 2 Devastator squads, one with las cannons, because I have a feeling those are still going to be a mainstay of Space Marine lists. Just having relatively cheap access to high-strength las cannons. Yeah. And then the fact that you have the once per game you can make a shot a 6. That was actually incredibly useful. It came up against my opponent because with my las cannons, when he moved one of his greater demons forward, I overwatched. And I overwatched with my las cannons. I rolled up my shots, got 1 hit naturally, and then just made one in auto 6 with my cherub. That's actually really useful. I wasn't so sure about it. I swore I was gonna miss having my once per game extra shot. But a once per game auto 6 is also actually pretty useful, as it turns out. Go figure. And then the other Devastator squad was a product of 10th edition because it's something you couldn't do in 8th or 9th or 7th for that matter. As a Dark Angel, I was running a squad of Devastators with Heavy Flamers. Not a thing you could do in previous editions, because for some reason that was just for the Blood Angels. They were the only Space Marines that could run Devastators with Heavy Flamers. Which is no longer the case. You can now they are now just on the regular heavy weapons list, which means they can go in a Devastator squad. Because previously they were on the Blood Angels weapons list, and they were on the Terminator heavy weapons list, but not on the regular heavy weapons list, which was really annoying. But anyway, so I had a lot of fun running my Fire Boys, and yeah, other than that, we had a Predator tank. I forget if it was the Annihilator or Destructor, the one with the autocannon and heavy bolters. I think that's the Destructor, but I'm sure someone will correct me in the comments if I've got that wrong. Other than that, I took a Landspeeder Vengeance and a Dark Shroud, just to kind of add a little bit more Dark Angels vibe to the list. My opponent was running 2 10-man bricks of the Bloodhounds, I believe they're called, the dogs that breathe fire. I think they're called Bloodhounds. I don't run Chaos Demons, so yeah. And then he ran 2 maxed out squads of Blood Crushers, which were probably the scariest thing in his army. And then on top of that, we had 2 Bloodthirsters and Scarbrand, which, again, somehow the Blood Crushers were the scariest thing in this army, which felt really weird, but yeah. So those were the lists that were taken. I was expecting to get... I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I was expecting to get stomped out. Yeah, I was fully expecting those Greater Demons to come across that table and just smack my units into outer space. Because I had one unit really capable of putting any kind of hurt on him, and he had invulnerable saves. So if he spiked his invulnerables at all, my las cannons were going to be neutered, and I was going to get absolutely obliterated. So yeah, I was not expecting to do well in this game. But oddly enough, the exact opposite ended up happening. I actually ended up doing extremely well. My opponent didn't really end up doing all that much damage to me. Partially because this was also his first game of 10th edition, and demons, I would argue, have a lot more stuff to remember. Or at the very least, he was having trouble remembering, because my opponent plays a lot more armies than I do, so he's got like 3 different games with 20 different armies that he's got to keep at the back of his head. So he was forgetting a lot of stuff for his demons, understandably so. Had he remembered, and it's like no one thing he forgot really made that big a difference, but I feel like overall the number of things he forgot probably did affect how things were going to work out. And yeah, so that made me feel a little bad towards the end of the game that he was like, we were getting like halfway through the game and suddenly he was, oh wow, I have this rule, wow, that would have been really useful like 3 turns ago. that was kind of a feel-bad moment, but it happens. And that's not a 10th edition problem. That's just new edition in general problems. Yeah, it is what it is. I feel like everybody, or almost everybody who plays Warhammer has been there at some point, so yeah. The weird thing I found is, as much as Games Workshop has upped the toughness of a lot of stuff to try and make vehicles and monsters more usable, the weird thing I noticed was that my tacticals ended up doing a weird amount of damage to the Bloodthirsters, the big scary demons. Just rolling 6s, and the fact that he was... In previous editions, the Greater Demons had 2-up armor saves and 4-up invulnerables, but as far as he could tell looking at his datasheet, they just had 4-up invulnerables. Or 4-up demon saves, which meant that anytime I scored a 6 to wound with my bolt gun, he now had a 50-50 shot at taking damage. Which felt a little weird. So, I feel like maybe Games Workshop probably should have rethought that, but again, I'm not sure that's an addition thing, rather than just Chaos Demons could probably do with a little bit of a touch-up. I personally found them, like, weirdly squishy, that, again, in a game where 6s to wound always wound, the Bloodthirsters with their comparatively low save ended up taking a lot of chip damage. But I guess you could argue that that's a good thing, that if you don't run heavy weapons, you still have a chance. Which is what ended up happening. The heavy flamers and the massed bolt guns got rid of the Bloodhounds pretty quick. His Blood Crushers stomped right through the Assault Marines. My Vengeance Speeder never used its ability to kill things, because the only units that died were far away from it. So... but yeah, the Vengeance Speeder and the Dark Shroud pretty much ended up just holding up the Blood Crushers, because it was the only thing I had that could. They stomped right through one of my Devastator squads, right through one of my tactical squads. They just absolutely obliterated through my gun line, and only the toughness 8 on my speeders kept them still long enough for me to kind of do others. One Blood Crusher unit got instantly annihilated by my Deathwing Knights. Spoiler alert for you Deathwing fans out there, Deathwing Knights are still really good. I personally don't like the way that they're good, because I really don't like how Storm Shields work now, but that's a personal thing. It's not like anything to do with the edition. Yeah, really, realistically, the big thing that I found was that Space Marine captains, it won't surprise anybody, are still really good. They might not be handing out rerolls, but they're still real handy to have, because the constant ability to be utilizing stratagems for free in a game that I've been seeing a lot of battle reports where CP ends up not being an issue. It was for me. I was popping Armor of Contempt and I believe it's called Intractable, the Dark Angel stratagem that lets you fall back and still shoot and charge. I found myself popping those stratagems constantly throughout the game. I was just constantly falling back, constantly trying to reduce incoming AP. Yeah, so it ended up being kind of repetitive that my Deathwing Knights were constantly getting charged by units trying to stop them from just annihilating the big scary demons. And then me falling back, popping the free strat, and charging his big demons anyway. So yeah, one Blood Crusher squad got immediately nuked by my Deathwing Knights, and then basically the rest of the game became my Deathwing Knights walking around the table, annihilating one greater demon after another. Oath of Moment really synergizes well with Terminators, like really well. Even with my Deathwing Knights only being strength 6 with their maces nowadays, which was kind of a blow to the gut that they're not strength 8 anymore, but it kind of didn't matter, because either way I was going to be wounding on 5s against the greater demons. But just hitting on 2s, rerollable, wounding on 5s, rerollable. Combine that with a Terminator captain, with the oh god, the special, the enhanced, the special Dark Angels enhancement for their close combat weapons. I am spacing on its name, which is weird because it's been around for a while. The sword relic from like previous editions. Anyways, I can't believe I'm brain farting on the name of that enhancement, but that's what I took on the Captain, and it paid dividends. The extra attack, the extra strength was really useful. I was walking around with a strength 6 power sword with an extra damage and extra attack. So now, you know, my relic power blade or mastercrafted power weapon went from strength 5 damage 2 to strength 6 damage 3. So now all of a sudden his sword was literally the same as the mace's, except with better AP, which didn't really matter. But yeah, and then even the once per game extra 3 attacks thing came up. It was actually incredibly useful. Or no, sorry, that it didn't come up because I thought it was going to come up because I had a captain, but then I remembered Terminator captains don't have that. So yeah, what am I talking about? But yeah, the Terminator captain with Deathwing Knights and Oath of Moment made absolute mincemeat out of the greater demons, particularly with, you know, the getting a head start from the las cannon on Overwatch with an Armorium Cherub making his hit an auto 6. They went down a lot quicker than I thought, which kind of makes me feel like Games Workshop, at least in the case of demons, has not done a good enough job making big scary stuff big and scary enough. Maybe that was just me, maybe it's just demons, but in general, the big thing that I came across, that I walked away from this game thinking was, it's not nearly as simple as was advertised. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it. The game was not nearly as simple as they were trying. Now, don't get me wrong, it still feels like Warhammer. You know, in general, my takeaway from this game was pretty positive because it still felt like Warhammer, but that also left a bit of a sour taste because, like, wow, it still feels more or less the same. So they made all of these changes, including a few that I'm really not happy about, and the game still basically feels the same. It's still tough to kill. It's still totally possible to chip damage big stuff down. It's still totally possible to run roughshod with your Terminators. The game feels the same, but now it's a little bit harder to remember all the little unit abilities, which was a big part of where my opponent struggled. Was not only was he having trouble remembering his army rules, he was now having trouble remembering what the special unit abilities were, which is kind of what I predicted in a previous video I put up talking about my thoughts on the new edition. I feel like this whole thing of having a special unit ability for every datasheet in the game, it completely flies in the face of, oh, we're trying to simplify the game, because instead of having one sub-faction army rule, you now have to remember dozens of datasheet specific rules. I'm still failing to see how that makes the game any simpler. But maybe I'm just missing something. So I wish I had some bigger insight into this game. It still feels like Warhammer. Space Marines are still reasonably tough. Demons are yet again, to me, it looks like they're going to be struggling. The only insight I can offer is that Blood Crushers are really good, and Bloodthirsters should be scarier than they are. But yeah, so this was a bit of a surprise for me. Definitely give me a few ideas of how I'm going to alter my lists going forward, because surprising no one, tacticals are maybe not the most efficient choice, but I love them anyway. So yeah, definitely got some ideas about what to do going forward. And I wish I could say this game changed my mind one way or the other about the edition. I'm still kind of on the fence. We'll just have to see where we go from here. But anyways, with all that being said, I'm going to quit rambling. But just a quick reminder, if you guys could hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you've made it all the way through the video at all, I really do appreciate it. But please, by all means, do let me know what you guys thought of the new edition down in the comments below. Are there any units I brought that you thought were stupid? Are there combos you've been loving? All in all, what have your thoughts been about the new edition? I genuinely want to hear it. This channel is as much about starting a conversation as anything else. But in the meantime, I'd love to see you guys in some of the future videos. I can't wait to see you over there. But in the meantime, happy wargaming.
Onward to glory!